Hello and welcome to ET Brand Equity presents The Big Leap, powered by CleverTap, an exclusive chat show that features pioneers and leaders from India's 12 largest and fastest growing brands. I'm your host Gautam Srinivasan, and during these conversations, we'll bring you an inside look into the growth engine which is powering businesses that have taken a big leap and understand the nuts and bolts of how they identified gaps in the market and created solutions which transform consumer behavior. Well, today's story is about another set of passionate digital pioneers who are empowering Indian travelers to plan, book, and manage their trips across rail, air, buses, and hotels. Ixigo, which was launched in 2007, is a technology company helping travelers make smarter travel decisions by leveraging artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science-led innovations on its OTA platforms. So, would you like to know how they did it and how they are creating a travel ecosystem for the next billion users? Then hop on board for this wide-ranging conversation with Alok Bajpai, Group CEO and co-founder at ixigo, and Manan Bajoria, Vice President for Growth at ixigo. Alok, Manan, great to have you on board with us for this conversation and looking forward to understanding more about the consumer retention journey at ixigo. As they say, every journey has a beginning. So let's look at the origin point. Alok, let me come to you first. While you were at business school, I believe you tried to enter the world of consulting. So as a leader where you are right now, if you met the Alok who took that route, what would you say to him?
Well, I would tell him to not even try. It's a funny story. So I actually sat through all the Big Four consulting interviews and I got consistent feedback from all of them that I cannot think straight and I cannot think in a structured manner. I think that should have been a cue for me to immediately stop trying and go for entrepreneurship. But one more thing I would tell the Alok of the day who actually took the plunge is that when we start, we kind of think it's a 5-10-year-old journey, right? That it's going to take to build something meaningful. But I think, if you want to build something that lasts, the mindset should be that it's a marathon and you need to keep running, right? So that's...
Well, the travel ecosystem is better for it. Let's expand on the history. As you mentioned, you didn't go with the Big Four and you did something on your own. And in that context is what I mean, that the ecosystem is better for that. We have entrepreneurs like you who've kind of made those strides. Now, you quit a high-paying job in Europe and you came back in, I believe, 2006 to start working on ixigo with Rajneesh. So what was going through your mind on taking that big leap?
Yeah, so we had been working for Amadeus, which is the largest travel tech company in the world, based out of the south of France, beautiful place, Mediterranean Sea. And I think in hindsight, like quitting an opportunity like that, you have to be a bit mad to do it. But I think we were a bit mad because, I still remember France had this 35-hour work week. So you were supposed to go back home at 5:30, right? And Rajneesh and I would keep sitting there till 7 or 8 in the office, trying new stuff, cool technology that we wanted to get our hands dirty with. And we would get scolding from our managers for that. And I think that passion to do something more that you're capable of doing, or let's say utilizing your full potential, is something that led to this thinking around, should we do something of our own? And I think the catalyst for me actually was when I was graduating from business school. Around the same time, two things happened. One was the movie Swades got released. And of course, everybody who was working abroad wanted to be Mohan.
Your emotional heartstrings were pulling.
Mohan, who wants to come back and light his bulb. And Steve Jobs' commencement speech at Stanford, which was for me a pivotal moment because I started connecting the dots. He talked about connecting the dots backwards. And I saw that, I had this travel technology experience. Rajneesh and I were both passionate about technology. Indian internet economy was starting to grow. The travel industry here was taking off with new low-cost carriers. So we were like, maybe our ikigai, as the Japanese call it, is to actually go back to India, do something in the travel tech world, right? That was the pivotal moment where we took the big leap.
All right. Well, we have a lot of startup founders watching this show, so maybe this could be a transformative moment. This conversation could be potentially a transformative moment for any of you watching. All right, Madan, let's come to your history, because you joined ixigo 3 years ago after working with Freecharge, Lenskart, and Airtel. So tell us about why you took that big leap to come here.
Yeah, so I had been an ixigo user and I loved what they were doing with a very simple and clean UI UX and solving actual customer pain points with respect to travel. Further, the opportunity to work on the massive scale of users that ixigo had was quite exciting. And in the last 3 years, we have grown 4 to 5x on many metrics. So ixigo group apps, which is ixigo Flights, Trains, Confirm Ticket, and Abhibus combined, now have 63 million plus monthly active users, 4 million plus monthly bookings, and annualized FY23 GTV of 72 billion plus. Lastly, and most importantly, I had heard great things about the ixigo culture for ownership and experimentation. And the chance to own things end to end and experiment as much as you want, because growth is all about experimentation, were just too good to miss.
All right. Speaking of growth, let's understand your growth journey first, because you started off as a meta search engine, then became a marketplace, and then became a transactional platform, which provides a bunch of services across verticals. Now, what's interesting is that during your initial days, a lot of the activity, especially in the top of the funnel, was non-transactional. So I want to understand from you how you kind of took that forward and converted to a more transactional and revenue generating sort of an enterprise for yourself, because I believe that you're now the second biggest OTA by operating revenues by FY22. So take us to that journey, Alok.
That's correct. So I think when we started, there were already a few OTAs that had started out in India, and when we looked at the market, we said we want to do something different. At INSEAD, I had read about Blue Ocean strategy. We didn't want to create another red ocean, do exact same thing as others. And we were always very passionate about solving real pain areas that travelers had. So when we spoke to people back then, the big pain area back then was there were multiple websites. You had to open different tabs on your browser, do the same search over and over again. So we said, why can't we bring all this together in one website, allow people to search, compare, and book wherever they want. So that's how meta search started. When we saw a lot of new internet users getting added with emergence of cheaper smartphones and cheaper internet, then we realized that the big opportunity was actually on the train side, where most OTAs globally were built with flights and hotels first. But in India, where 90% plus people haven't stepped into an airport, it would be obvious that train would be a very important mode of travel for an OTA, right? So we took that bet very early. First built a utility app for train travelers, which became very popular. And I think for a long time, we were not thinking or worrying about monetization. We just wanted to make sure we build things that people want, that travelers crave for, irrespective of whether we had an immediate path to monetization or not. And over time, as we saw organic growth coming in for those features, for utility, we realized that we are now sitting on a scale of users where we could monetize with transactions. And that's when we took the pivot going into the OTA business model, about 4 years back, about 5 years back, in fact, for trains, and then about 3 years back for flights. And we saw that transactions started to take off because people had already built this trust with using a utility app. And then, once they had the chance to transact with us, because they trusted us, we started seeing the transactions take off. And despite COVID, we kept growing and became like the second largest OTA.
All right. So utility first and transactions later. We'll expand on that. And Manan, I'll bring you into this conversation, because let's fast forward to the lockdowns, right? Where travel obviously wasn't happening. But a lot of the non-transactional users were still using your platform extensively. So I want to understand from you, how did you salvage this traffic so that you still keep your customers retained with you, so that once things lift off in terms of the lockdown restrictions being lifted, you can then capitalize on the oncoming boom in travel?
So during lockdown, when travel came to a standstill, we obviously saw a massive decline in users coming onto our apps. And that is when we started brainstorming as to what else can we do. And one of the first things that we did was we integrated the COVID live tracker within our app, because everyone in India was continuously monitoring the rise in COVID cases. And that led us to more and more people coming onto our apps and maintain some level of DAUs that we had earlier gotten. At the same time, the travel guidelines were changing very, very frequently. Every state was coming up with their own guidelines, and we launched a COVID-19 travel guideline section as well, which helped millions of users plan and travel accordingly with respect to the guidelines. We also, at the same time, launched our flights full cancellation product on flights, which is called as ixigo Assured. Now, since the guidelines were quite ambiguous and plans were changing frequently, this feature allowed you to cancel your flight for any reason and get full refund instantly back, right? And we all know that flight cancellation charges are pretty high. So this combined with a lot of content marketing during that time. So we started focusing and created a lot of public awareness videos. How do you travel amidst the pandemic? What are the do's and don'ts? And a lot of these videos went viral, which garnered us a lot of organic views. And lastly, we also saw that flights had opened up earlier than trains, and the rollout in trains was slow. So, and the train users also had a lot of urgent travel needs. So we started focusing a lot more on the travel audience, on the train audience for flights, because they took to booking flights first and then gradually moved back to trains.
All right, we'll zoom in on some of the points that you've mentioned, but before that, what Alok said, the origin with train apps and then going over to, say, the flight apps. That's interesting because at one point, I believe ixigo had 6 apps, which got culled down to 2. So now you have the Jet Set, which is for the flight, and then you have the mass product, which is for the train. So I want to understand, Manan, how do you kind of tune marketing and outreach for 2 very diverse set of customers, and how do you plan to upsell to the next billion users who are coming on stream?
Yeah, so our flights app is basically geared towards the first 100 million users who are looking to book flights seamlessly and looking forward to value-added services and great customer support. While on the other hand, the trains app is focused towards the next billion users, which is looking for a simple and quick way to book trains, along with the utility features like train running status and PNR status. Now, the train app is a lightweight multilingual app because it's focusing on the NBU audience. And both the apps actually have all the services. So you could book flights, trains, buses, and hotels from both the apps. It's just that the train app will have more features like running status, PNR status, etc., which are geared towards that. Now, marketing communication obviously differs for both the segments. For the FHM, first 100 million users audience, we focus a lot more on flight offers as well as the services like ixigo Assured. While for the train audience, we focus a lot more on the utility features like PNR status and running status. And obviously for the NBU audience, the communication is multilingual while being completely English for the FHM audience. Now, these utility features actually act like an acquisition flywheel for us. So users come onto our apps, experience these features, build their comfort and trust, and then they move on to booking train tickets with us. And once they do that, then we focus on upselling them other products like flights, buses, and hotels. In fact, we are the only OTA in India which shows you flight and bus options as well when you search for any train.
All right, I wonder if it will continue, this thought of what you said, Alok, of utility first and monetization later. And I speak of that in the context of the fact that, usually OTAs, they start with flights and then they go into hotels and then they start expanding on marketing and outreach. But ixigo had a different journey. You were a train first OTA, and then you looked at solving a lot of the issues which typical users faced, and then you kind of expanded it. So the attitude of customer first has got ixigo to where it is. But the question is, will it still continue, considering profitability targets will become more demanding as you grow even bigger? Your thoughts on that?
So I think that travel is an experiential category. It's not a category which is just about selling tickets, right? Right from the moment when you start thinking of booking your next trip till the time you've actually found the options, booked the trip and you're in the journey, you're at the destination, there are a plethora of problems, micro pain points, which only a traveler can empathize with, right? Where they feel lost or they don't have access to the right information, or they want more predictability, they want some hand holding. And I think when we looked at travel, we wanted at some point to be holistically solving this problem. Now, of course, you can pick up some pieces of this and solve them first because it's a large number of pain points to solve. And we started by solving some of the utility pieces because we felt that businesses which were primarily selling tickets were ignoring all those utility issues because they thought they were non-monetizable. But the fact is that those utility problems brought millions of travelers organically into our ecosystem because nobody else was solving them as well as we were, right? And then, once you build that trust, so the beautiful thing about having something utilitarian is that since you're not selling anything to the customer, there is a very unique kind of trust that you build, right? Because you have accurate information, you have guidelines, like Manan said. We even had a vaccine. We officially tied up with the COVID app. We started helping travelers in tier 2, 3, 4 cities find their nearest vaccination centers, get themselves vaccinated. So the intent was always to help, right? And when you have that kind of intent, you build trust, which is a very different level of trust, which transactional apps will find it very hard to build. So I think that bedrock was unique to us. As we become transactional, I think what we are discovering is even as a transactional OTA, there are use cases others have not solved, right? And these are mostly post-booking customer support-led issues that customers still face today, right? So we are on the path to build the best customer experience in the OTA space in India. And I think it's easier said than done. We've just started that journey. It's been just a few years. There is still a lot more for us to do.
Well, that blue skies thinking has also percolated into your marketing, because I believe there was a time ixigo went zero budget into marketing, and social media was a boon, and ixigo was one of the first brands to capitalize on doing quirky quizzes on Facebook, which drove a lot of traffic. So I raised this question in the context of how does ixigo do more with less, because I believe, from a primary funding perspective, till 2020 you raised about 22 million. That's a quarterly budget for a lot of the players in this category for marketing. So give us your secrets.
No, so I think some of these things are born because of adversity, right? So the first 5 years we were almost bootstrapped, right? Our Series A, or the first big round happened in 2011, whereas we had started working on the idea in 2006. And I think we discovered that if you don't have money, you'll have to be more creative, right? Finding ways to rank organically on Google using SEO. We spent a lot of time on that, but that has very high ROI. Then we figured out that content of any sort, and of course video is now, but back then maybe it was quizzes on Facebook, and tomorrow it might be something else, but content that engages travelers, is a great way to bring in again those eyeballs without spending a lot of dollars, right? Especially in the world of social media, if you're able to create informative, quirky content, right, it can go a lot more miles than an ad, right? So we don't make ad films when we're building that content. We want to either help or entertain or inform. And most of our videos, whether you look at the hotel hacks video we did, or you look at the Agla Station Mars, or you look at many other videos that we did, they all fall in that category, right? Where we are trying to be quirky and at the same time maybe send a social message or a informational message to travelers.
Which resonates. I'll come back to you for understanding how you do moment marketing so well. But before that, Manan, let me come to you and also bring in this topic of email campaigns as well, because that's also important, because in the broader ecosystem, getting new users to stay loyal and come back for repeat transactions, that's very tough. Now, in that context, email campaigns are an important route for user engagement and retention. And when I look at some of the facts and figures, ixigo's email campaigns, they've achieved an open rate of over 50%. And here you've leveraged CleverTap's Clever campaign. So take us through the contours of this partnership with CleverTap and how it's helped you retain customers in a better way.
Yeah, so we were one of the first few customers of CleverTap in India, and we worked with them closely to innovate engagement use cases, especially for the travel segment. And one such use case was fare alerts. Now, everybody loves to book cheap flights, right? They want to save money and book when the flights are cheapest. Now, with fare alerts, we automatically send a push notification as soon as the fares increase or decrease for the flight search that you did on ixigo. Similarly, for trains, we have availability alerts. So if you have done a search for a train and we see that last few seats are left for that particular train search and date, we'll send you a push notification alerting you about that. And that automatically leads to higher open rates and as well as higher conversion. And we send millions of such pushes and emails every day to our users. And all of that is powered by CleverTap webhooks and APIs.
All right. Alok, any points from your side on the partnership with CleverTap? How have you found it?
I think they've been great partners. We've been partnered from very early days, and we've learned a lot from each other in that partnership. Right? There's definitely a lot of value for companies like us, which are very customer obsessed and who look at all the pain areas through data points to react immediately to them using marketing automation. Right? So this platform allows us to be a lot more responsive, a lot more proactive in our engagement with customers.
All right. It's the superpower which enables brands like yours to really go ahead and talk about retention in a much, much more robust manner. All right. Coming back to the point you mentioned about quirky videos. So whether it's stuff that you can take from hotels or Agla Station Mas, they have been extremely viral. And I want to understand from you the ixigo playbook, because you've really done moment marketing well. How do you approach this from the perspective of creating a great long-term impact for the brand? And what's its relevance in consumer retention for you?
So I think our playbook is very simple, that the intent has to be very genuine and honest. And the intent of these videos is not to make an ad. Right, so Ashish Chopra, who is actually our viral video expert, he strongly believes that, if you build quirky content, right, shares is the best currency you can have, right, which you cannot get by spending millions of dollars either on a promoted social media post or on a TV ad. In fact, what we have seen is that the kind of users this has brought in to us, right, in the past few years, have actually been some of the most sticky customers today, because they came in with a curiosity to find out who is this brand who's actually sending out informational or quirky content. And I think in today's world, right, there's so much clutter all around that for brands to actually stand out, you need to do something different, right? And for us, that difference was really about saying, let's give videos, our best shot, be as open about it as we can, because we don't constrain to only talking about our products, right? Most of our videos may not even mention our product. And I think
is that the key here, that viewers don't like to see ads, they like to see conversations?
Absolutely. I think it's about being part of the conversation with the end customer, right? And being topical about it. So if there is something which is in the moment, right? So, and this hotel video, actually the Bali incident had just happened, where Indian family was actually caught taking out certain things from the hotel. And we were like, hey, hang on, there are certain things you can legally take out, which people are not aware about. So let's kind of use that moment to actually get this video out. And I think, again, some of these things actually are done in a very serendipitous manner. So it's not planned, it's not something you have project plans for, but you sit, you brainstorm, something comes out and you launch it. And a lot of our products got launched that way as well.
Sometimes the best output comes when it's organic, when it's not thought out that this is what we'll do, but rather let's all talk to each other and let's see what comes up. Absolutely. All right, let's also understand how ixigo is structured as an organization. I want to understand from you, Alok, how does your culture enable leaders to come up? And in that context, how does it also make them retention focused in their thinking? Because the first issue they would face is you always have a competitor who can outspend you on growth, outspend you on retention, or probably replicate your playbook in double time. So in terms of creating that organizational culture of leaders, what makes ixigo unique?
So I think we spend a lot of time understanding customer behavior and customer pain points. And I'll give you a few examples. Most of the members of our leadership team, read every single 1-star review left on Play Store for our apps, right? Because if there is a customer who's in pain, all of us should empathize with that pain, right? And this comes from one of our core values, which is empathy, right? So we define this as one of our most important core value, whether it comes to hiring, whether it comes to dealing with tough times, whether it comes to understanding customer pain. we go back to this core value all the time and say, are we empathizing enough with what's going on, right? And I think once that becomes your culture, a lot of decisions are governed by, is this right for the customer, right? And not whether this is just about increasing our top line or bottom line, but actually can it benefit the customer? Because whatever benefits the customer in the long term will benefit, all the other stakeholders. That is something we have figured out. And the starting point is actually might not be that obvious, but getting the right people in the team who have this mindset, right? So we hire for attitude, we hire for cultural fitment, we hire for people who have this empathy that we talk about, and make sure that that reinforces through our decisions and our operational style, right? So as founders, and I think once you build that empathy culturally, you will see that right from the top to the bottom, everyone's aligned on, are our customers happy today, right? And if not, we should go back and fix that.
All right. And as a leader, how do you feel? As I mentioned, folks are leading brands like Sprinkler, Unicommerce, or Fleetex. How does it feel for you as a leader when the alumni of ixigo go out and create their own
so
brands?
I think on that part, we have actually created a culture where we have empowered people, like Manan described, to take their own decisions. In a way, it gets to a point where you start functioning like an entrepreneur within the system, right? So it's like a startup within the startup. A lot of people already operate that way here. And maybe, then they realize that, hey, it's not rocket science. I can do my own thing.
If I can do it here, I can do it anywhere.
Absolutely. And I think it's great. We feel proud about the fact that almost 1/5 of our XC gems, as we call our alumni, are actually doing their own thing. In many cases, Rajneesh and I have backed some of these entrepreneurs as well. And I think it just goes back to how we've dealt with tough times. I think once you have seen the worst, once you've seen 2008, which we survived, and then COVID, where we had zero revenues for many months, if you see events like that in a growth stage company, and you learn how to persevere through such, I would say near-death experiences, you become fearless, right? Because what is the biggest fear when starting a company? What if it fails? And you're like, hey, I lived through 2 or 3 near-death experiences in the last startup with the founders, so I'm fearless now, right? So I think that helps.
And folks remember that, because once you've been with someone in the trenches, you've been through the down times.
Absolutely.
Then when times are better, you just go forward. Absolutely. And some lessons for our viewers there, many of whom are startup founders. All right, let's take the conversation on a look ahead mode. And Manan, let me bring you in for this. Because when we look at the difference between OTAs and say direct booking options from airlines on hotels, there's a vast difference in terms of how CX is approached. OTAs have really got the game right when it comes to CX via their investments in tech, product and market intelligence. But I want to understand, post the pandemic right now, do you see this equation changing? Because folks from earlier, it was a tier 1 game, now it's tier 3, tier 4, tier 5, and they're also coming on to the digital mainstream. So do you see this equation changing where OTAs had the lead in terms of CX, but maybe it's high time for airlines and say the hotels who have direct booking options, maybe they will now step up their CX game? Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I don't see this equation changing. And my sense is OTAs will continue to have a majority share and continue to further grow that share.
Okay.
And that's because OTAs tend to focus a lot more on the end-to-end user experience that they're able to deliver. And that is completely powered by technology, data science, and AI innovation. So for example, we have a personalized AI-driven travel assistant called Tara, and that solves almost 86% of the customer support queries without any human intervention. Similarly, we focus a lot more on the user journey and to make it as seamless as possible, which automatically leads to customer delight and higher retention. So just as an example, we have launched a feature which is automated web check-in. So as soon as you book a flight, you just select that option, and the feature will automatically do the web check-in for you and send you the boarding pass on WhatsApp. So you don't have to worry about when does that open, when does the web check-in open and all that, right? So these are the smaller things that actually lead to that customer delight and higher retention. Now, on to the tier, almost 95% of our current bookings have an origin or destination which is already non-tier 1 city. And as more non-tier 1 audience goes digital first, the trains would be their first step towards that journey. And post that, they will gradually move on to flights and other modes of travel. And I think that puts us in a great position to capture all those users.
All right, I want to expand on this and look at the anomalies and how you plan to capitalize on those anomalies on your way forward to becoming, say, the most loved OTA. And when I speak of anomalies, I mean it in the context of the fact that the travel ecosystem, Alok, is not as transparent as, let's say, the e-commerce experience that we have, right? Whether it's, say, additional charges, convenience fees, or refunds, it's not there yet. So how do you plan on solving these anomalies to become the default platform for Indian users?
It's a great question. I think when we transitioned from being a utility app to an OTA, we realized that there were a multitude of problems which OTAs which had existed for more than a decade had not solved. And they seemed very obvious, right? Like, why should you have to wait for days or weeks to get a refund back, right? And all of us have suffered that pain, right? During COVID, maybe we waited months. When we just applied first principle thinking to this, we figured out it's not that difficult a problem to solve, right? It's about somebody willing to take the risk of a few additional days of that money coming back from a supplier, right? So we launched this product called ixigo Assured, where we said we'll guarantee an instant full refund. We'll take all the risk, right? We might price it a little bit. We could charge a little bit extra to give you that tension-free experience. But that's what customers wanted, and it's become one of the most popular products in our ecosystem right now. Similarly, we found out that people had a lot of pain in rescheduling. They would need to call up someone, they would need to look at all these options, and it was not seamless. They would be charged more. At that time, you are told that now you have to pay this much extra just for modification fees, and of course the fare difference, etc. So we said, why can't that also become much more simpler, right? With a lot less, let's say, terms and conditions hidden in the smallest font. So we launched this product called ixigo Flex very recently, which allows you a fully flexible reschedule, change the airline, change the origin, change the destination, change the date, change the time of your flight, right? It's a fully flexible ticket. Of course, available at a small extra charge for the ixigo Flex. Now, it wasn't very hard to, like, building these products is not the hardest part. And I say this to the team, that the hardest part is identifying the customer pain area and, figuring out ways that can be solved, in a meaningful and sustainable manner, right? So for us, we had so much data around existing cancellations and reschedules, right, from the past history, that we could know how to price these things, in a positive unit economics manner. And at the same time, it was great customer experience for end customer, great for suppliers. I'll give you a little insight. Many people are now using ixigo Assured to also lock in a price for a future date. And then they'll decide, like, I might book a ticket to go and then decide 2 days prior whether I go or not, because if I decide 2 days prior to book, the fares will be very high. And similarly on trains, I'll not get availability if I decide last day. So I might as well block that seat, like putting a handkerchief on the seat, so to say, right? And people are actually finding these unique use cases once we identified and solved the pain. So figuring out the pain requires empathy. It requires sitting with the customer at times and seeing how they use, apps. What do they struggle with every day? And I think that's the secret sauce. That's where we spend a lot of our time on.
Alok, as we look to conclude our growth story conversation, let me ask you a question on some advice that you would give to many of our startup founders who are watching this show, because you've had quite a journey. And I guess the travel ecosystem, as I mentioned, is always grateful that you didn't go to the big four, you started ixigo. Now, you're an investor in many startups yourself. So what would you say to our viewers on taking that big leap in business?
So I would advise entrepreneurs to think big, to take bold and risky steps, right? Not be shy of taking risks, because the downside risk is the same. But how big the upside is a function of how big can you think, right? And a lot of entrepreneurs would constrain themselves because, hey, I'm not from this domain, or I don't have that, or I think the beauty about entrepreneurship is that resource constraints should not define how big you can be. Right? Because that's what a startup is all about, right? That's the definition of a startup, that you're trying to do something which is beyond your resources. So I think there's no downside in trying to do something far bigger than what you initially might have thought. And I think one more thing, if I had to add there, was never be shy of reinventing yourself, right? I think whenever we have had a crisis, we've gone back to the drawing board and come out by reinventing ourselves and making it much bigger on the other side. Sometimes there was no light at the end of the tunnel, but you have to believe that if you do something that's right for the customer will reward you, and everything follows from there. So just be true to the customer. In the long term, that karma actually comes back, and we've seen that, right? And we continue to be humble enough to say, what we are doing today might be totally irrelevant 5 years down the line. And we need to find ways to continue to remain relevant by identifying new pain areas that we need to solve.
All right, boil it all down, free your mind, and the rest will follow. Alok, Manan, thank you so much for giving us the time and, of course, outlining the blueprint of this retention engine which is powering ixigo's growth. I'm sure it serves as a great reference point for all of our viewers who are watching this. Meanwhile, well, that's the growth story of ixigo. Let's now shift focus to the investment story of ixigo. Well, the digital revolution is bringing the world closer together, nowhere more so than in India, where travelers are more comfortable making their travel plans and bookings online. As per reports, the online travel market is growing rapidly in the country and is expected to touch 58% of the overall travel market here by 2025. Now, this offers a huge opportunity for players in the near future venturing in the online travel aggregator business in the country. So, let's now speak with Salvage, Managing Director at Sequoia India, and how he sees growth panning out in this category and why they decided to back ixigo. Well, we have with us Salvage of Sequoia to talk about the investment story behind ixigo. Salvage, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You've had a long relationship with the founders. Take us through the contours of that relationship and that journey.
So we've known Alok and Rajneesh for many, many years. We first met them in 2008 and we invested in 2016. So that's a very long courtship period, a very long period where we got to know them. We realized they were always exceptional product folks. They were folks who really understood what the consumer wanted. They were just waiting for the market opportunity to appear in front of them. And towards 2016, smartphones were really taking off. 4G was rolling out, and the deck was set. The stage was set for their success.
All right. So let's understand more on the investment side. I want to get your view on the evolution of ixigo itself and how you viewed it, because ixigo pivoted from meta search to marketplace during your investment, whereby it was not following the typical OTA playbook. So as an investment prospect, what sealed the deal? Since non-traditional playbooks, they're hard to build conviction because of a lack of traction. Your thought of that? What sealed the deal?
So they had lots and lots of user growth, particularly from train users. They had an information application for train users, which let them track where trains were, which let them book train tickets. That was growing very quickly. And that user base was just coming online. So that was showing tens of millions of monthly users, was adding those users very efficiently without a lot of spend. And those users are very sticky. Whenever they needed to travel by train, get content, they would use the ixigo applications. And it was a much better experience for those users than other options. So that was a very differentiated way of acquiring customers. And we thought that, given the size of that base, there would be an opportunity to build a differentiated OTA marketplace.
But what about the monetization aspect? Because they were barely logging 20 crore in revenues at that point in time. So what was going through your mind when you thought about the monetization? They were great in terms of attracting and retaining users, but in terms of monetization, what were you thinking?
So when you have so many users, you will find ways to monetize them. We're big believers in the India consumer story, like many other investors. We're big believers in Middle India and how it will consume and transact much more online. This was a digital service. This is something that millions of people do every day, as in travel by trains. If this was going to be the best way for them to book, transact, and monitor that travel, this was going to be find ways to make money.
All right. So let's look at it from this perspective of, ixigo's customer attraction and retention strategy. Where do you think they did well, and how did you think it helped them tide over the pandemic times and kind of move on for growth?
Yeah, they are fantastic at using data. They're very good at using all sorts of tools to use lots and lots of information about the users to target the right offers to the right users. There's lots of very specific insights that they can garner about what someone might do next, what type of mode of transport that they like, what offers to give them to encourage them to book, or the ways for them to protect their travel. Travel is something that often has cancellations and changes, and railways often have waitlist tickets and unique booking circumstances. They understood those nuances very well. And they were able to also keep those users engaged with interesting content and information even when they weren't traveling.
All right. Now, a part of this growth story has also included acquisitions. So ixigo acquired Abhibus and Confirmed Ticket last year. So do you think these acquisitions are going to be a necessary part of the growth story of ixigo? More such acquisitions also coming in as the company looks to capitalize on long-term trends?
Yeah, so they had a very nice distribution platform going into COVID. In COVID, lots of travel startups faced unfortunate circumstances. And they were able to acquire two very good teams with Abhibus and Confirmed Ticket. And those have been a core part of the growth coming out of COVID. They added a lot of capability, they added lots more users, and we think they'll be long-term drivers of growth for the company going forward. And the way they've integrated these acquisitions is very interesting, because they've kept the core team and kept them very incented to continue working with them. That they've taken the best of what they could get from them and let them keep building for success. And absolutely, we will do more acquisitions.
You've got the brain trust with them of these companies, which they will look to leverage. All right, before we let you go, Shailesh, for Sequoia, ixigo's IPO could spell a bumper return. But I want to get your view on the lessons that you've learned from this investment that you would apply to other prospects.
So there's lots of learnings in this. One, ixigo is always a very frugal company. They struggled to attract capital for many years. That made them who they are. They learned lots of lessons of what to do and what not to do. They never had the opportunity of having excess money, so they always had to take the hard way. So retention, as you talked about, was always a very core part of what they did. Second, they use technology super well. This is one of the leanest teams in India. For the revenue per employee, or the revenue per monthly active users, or the number of employees per monthly active users, is best in class. There's very few companies that will have this scale of user base with such a small team. And finally, they're very good people. That what they have done to be right by users, the amount of stress that they took to refund all their users during COVID, that knowing that their users were particularly sensitive to the impacts of lockdowns and the like, the company dipped into whatever very little cash balances that they had and made sure everybody was made whole, including all convenience fees, all transaction fees, which are normally never refunded. So this is a story of good people doing good things slowly over the long term. That's the main lesson for us.
Good people doing good business, fighting hard, fighting strong. Those are the key words there. Thank you so much for giving us your time, Shailesh. Pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we wrap up another episode of ET Brand Equity Presents The Big Leap, powered by CleverTap. I hope you enjoyed listening to these stories of growth and retention. And don't worry, we'll be back again soon to bring you two more stories of growth and retention from some of India's most successful brands. We're off, and we hope you'll be back with us. Till next time, this is your host, Gautam Srinivasan, signing off.